everybody! Today I'm going to show you how I ironed my giant Perler bead art using one of my recent commissions. This piece was based on fan art by Totamori-M on Twitter, who you can find a link to in the video description. For my ironing method, it's important to have a few things on hand: wax paper, parchment paper, and at least 2 pegboards. As usual, I used Microsoft Paint to make my template and then broke the template up into pieces that would fit on my 69x49 super pegboards, beading one panel at a time. When I finish a panel, or when I'm ready to start ironing the individual pieces, I start by flipping it over using a second pegboard. What I do is I line up the pegs into the beads and lay it flat, making certain each bead is firmly lined up onto a peg. By the way, you can leave projects like this and stack things on top of them or carry them around without having to worry about the beads coming loose, as long as they're firmly sandwiched between the boards. It helps not to have boards with melted pegs so they don't end up stuck to one side or the other later when you're pulling off the top board. The reason I start with flipping is because I always iron the back side of projects before the front. I do this because for the first side I iron, I'm going to use wax paper. Wax paper can be hard to peel off and leaves a residue on the beads, but the benefit of this paper is that when you iron it with the wax side down on the beads, the wax melts and sticks firmly enough that the beads will stay in place even if they're only slightly melted together. This makes it easy to move, stack, store, and align each piece of the project. Keep in mind that it's still best to iron the first side as evenly as you can, focusing on the edges and then giving the center lots of attention, as densely populated areas will melt slower. Next is the process of lining up the edges of each piece one at a time. The wax paper holds firmly enough that I can turn the pieces onto their unironed side and use the excess wax paper to iron the seams on the back side first. I carefully peel back the wax on one of the sides so that I can clearly see the beads through the wax paper, line them up, and then start with focusing heat and pressure on just the connecting beads before going over the whole area again to make it more even and organic. My goal is to hide the seam as much as possible, so I might go back over the same area several times. One thing I highly recommend is breaking up your pieces so that you're ironing just 2 pieces together as much as possible. If you have to iron 2 sides, like a corner for example, it's much more likely you'll have alignment issues because of the way the beads shrink together when they've been melted. I also recommend making sure the focal points of your piece, like a character's face, don't end up being split up by any seams, just in case they don't perfectly line up. Once I finish the back side of the piece and every section is securely ironed together, I carefully flip over the entire piece. Because I did all the ironing on the back first, the seams are much less noticeable, and because the entire front will be ironed at once, it'll be much harder to tell where the pieces are joined together. This time, instead of wax paper, I'll use parchment paper, which doesn't grab the beads or leave a residue. Even if it sticks for a moment, it'll easily lift away. Once again, I focus on edges and then give a lot of attention to dense areas, and I also try to make sure areas with seams are even and blend together nicely. There's a very good chance that if you're using a very hot iron like me, you'll notice the pieces warping. You can avoid this by only ironing far enough so that the edges of the beads are holding together, but there's still a hole in the center. However, a little bit of warping is likely always going to happen, especially on larger pieces. You can keep them under books or heavy boxes to flatten them out when they're separated, and when they're ironed into one piece like this, you can do the same thing. I recommend carefully peeling off the wax paper as much as you can after doing your first ironing on the front, because this releases the tension that the paper itself is holding and makes it easier to get the beads flat again. After it's cooled for the first time, I'll check the front again and see if there's areas that need to be evened out. And I'll test how strong it can hold itself up and re-iron areas that need a firmer hold. I'll also make sure the seams don't have hugely noticeable gaps and that everything seems like it's secure, and then leave it under some heavy items again to avoid too much warping. Once I know a few thumbtacks will hold it to a wall without it bending away or falling apart, I know it's done. That pretty much covers everything you need to know about how I iron my giant pieces. I hope that's helpful if you decide to use my method. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments about things that you'd like to see videos on, or just anything you need to know really quick about what you saw today or anything else speed related. I love teaching people. I definitely have plans for more tutorials in the future and also just some fun time lapses. Keep an eye out for this one. Have a good day!